Does anyone else by chance remember that badass trailer to the original Dead Island? The trailer that for years, and probably to this day, is still considered to be one of the best trailers ever created, with this insanely somber and serious tone, with a little girl getting chased by some infected only to be bitten, rescued by her parents, and then tragically killed by them once she then turned and attacked them, and the entire thing being played in reverse. I mean, the hype for this game was insane. And then, I'm sure you know how the story goes, we finally ended up getting the game, and the trailer's tone was completely absent from the final product, with it being one of the earliest moments in the modern era of gaming where we ended up getting catfished by his studio into buying a game that we didn't expect to be what it was. I mean, don't get me wrong, I was and still am a fan of the Dead Island games. However, you can't argue that the trailer wasn't at least a little misleading in the game's direction and the tone. Anyways, in light with Dead Island 2 slowly clawing itself out of the metaphorical grave that it's been stuck in for the last decade or so, I wanted to go back and revisit the original Dead Island game. Or rather, the remastered versions, I should say, as the OG versions are no longer sold on Steam unless you manage to get a code off G2A or something like that. But it was during this time of revisiting the island of Benoy and re-experiencing the porn levels of voice acting and narrative building.
Who the fuck are you? A convict? Speak! So why don't you call your own people? Contact the fleet!
I came to. I was on the other side of the wall. But she's probably still alive. They wanted to keep her. Use her.
That I was starting to think about the sequel again. I still to this day would recommend Dead Island Definitive Editions. As a fan of zombie games, a fan of Techland, you know, the original devs behind these games that then went on to create the Dying Light games, or even as a piece of video game history, I would still recommend these. As the OG Dead Island released around the same year as Dead Rising 2 off the record, and just replaying it reminds me of that era of gaming. It just takes me back. But discussing the original games or the remasters isn't what we're focusing on today, at least not for most of today. Forgive me for saying this and being a little bit pessimistic myself, but the Dead Island name seems to be cursed. With Techland, the game got negative press due to the disparity between the trailer and the game itself, on top of the game having its own bugs and performance issues at the time. Then you have Dead Island Riptide, that was then lampooned for being too similar to the original Dead Island to really be considered a proper sequel or even a product that was worth the full price, as it felt like a weird mashup between a giant DLC and a half step of a sequel to the original Dead Island game. And then Techland admitted they themselves weren't happy where Dead Island was at the time of launch, but Deep Silver, the game's publisher, rushed them and the game to be out, shifting blame from the devs to the publisher, an all too common theme these days, as publishers are seen as the corporate heads trying to reach deadlines and gain as much of a financial boost as they possibly can. Moving on to the sequel, never mind it was in development hell for almost a decade and its newest trailer looking as great as it does, it's kind of hard for me at least to ignore that the game's developer, Dambuster Studios, being the same ones that helped deliver this train wreck of a game. While great conceptually, Homefront: The Revolution was one of the worst games I've personally ever played, and it was my first introduction to Dambuster. It's also a bit ironic that Homefront: The Revolution itself was another game that both went through its own development hell and was published by Deep Silver, who was also responsible for another recent buggy mess. So the track record of both the developer and publisher isn't all that solid with me, and I brought the trailer of the original Dead Island up because in an interview that was just conducted at the beginning of this month with Dambuster Studios on the direction of the sequel, Dan Evan, the technical art director at Dambuster, brought it up himself, making it clear that the tone of the recent trailers we've seen relating to Dead Island 2 are exactly what they're going for, with this game not taking itself too seriously with excessive amounts of gore and blood, with a high emphasis on the physical degradation of the infected. I thought him bringing up that original trailer was interesting because it shows that at the very least the developers are well aware of how the contrast from the trailer to the game back in 2011 was a spot of anger from those that did buy the game. While I doubt it's an attempt to deflect attention from Dead Island 2's troubled development or even a way to avoid the hurdles and challenges Dambuster has done themselves while this game has shifted into their hands, I'm hoping him kind of putting attention on the original disparity from the announcement trailer to the final product is them kind of indirectly saying that everything we see in the game is everything the final product is going to be. Hopefully our expectations aren't incredibly diverted and what we see in these trailers now are built up on and advanced in some kind of way in the final product. While I am actually surprisingly hyped for the eventual release for Dead Island 2 and genuinely hope it does deliver on everything developers have promised and shown, I'm hoping for the best while reluctantly preparing for the worst. In the current climate, with games releasing in an unfinished state with a 46-month time frame for it to slowly be updated to what it was supposed to be at launch, seemingly becoming the norm in some cases when it really shouldn't be expected or accepted at all, I'm thinking worst case scenario, Dead Island 2 is going to be exactly like that. Hopefully anyways, because at least in that case it means the game, while buggy and lacking a little bit of content at launch, is still fundamentally decent and can support a healthy community. It's just a matter of how long are you willing to support a game like that, or how long are you personally willing to support a practice like that in this industry. Just like with the loot boxes back in 2015 and pretty much any other controversy in video games now, unless you start dealing with your wallet and refusing to pay, things like this are just going to continue to be done. But that's really a topic for a whole nother video. But what do you think? Where are your hopes at with Dead Island 2? Do you think with Dambuster completely rebooting this, and hopefully they learn their lesson from the release of Home for the Revolution, this is not going to be a repeat of that game and we're actually going to get something that is well worth the wait? Again, Dambuster's been working on this game for 4 years and apparently they rebooted the project, so whatever Jaeger and Sumer Digital or whatever previous developers had their hands on Dead Island 2 is completely gone. This is all Dambuster from the ground up. Do you think it's going to be pulled off? Do you think that this is going to be the perfect scenario where Deep Silver finally learned about the release from the original Dead Island, as well as how the Home for the Revolution was received from Dambuster, and then of course recently Saints Row and that being released with a bunch of bugs and issues? Do you think that Deep Silver is going to step in and say, no, this game needs to be 100% polished and in the best playable state it can possibly be before we release this? I want to hear from you. Are you apprehensive? Are you excited? Are you eager to see what this game is going to turn out to be? Do you think they're going to end up delaying it yet again? Let's talk down in the comment section, and like always, big shout out, thank you to my patrons as well as, everyone in the Discord. It's nice to hop in every now and again and have a chat with everybody. If you're not yet in the Discord, there's, I believe, almost 3,000 people spanning a multitude of games, so if you're interested, maybe check that out. You can contact me directly. I criticize a video or even, have a little bit of discourse with myself or someone else about video games in general. It doesn't have to be tied to Dead Island, but until next time, see y'all later.